seven-figure freedom, not just how to create a seven-figure business, but one that you don't feel a slave to. I'm excited to introduce today's guest. Today's going to be an amazing episode. Thanks for joining us today. Stay tuned. So the big question is this: how do those of us in the real estate industry with crazy amounts of ambition, how do we think bigger than the building of our own empires? How do we simultaneously seek success and significance, income and impact? My name is Justin Stoddard, and this is the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. Again, thrilled to be back. Very excited about today's episode. There are countless ways to build a successful business, but there are few ways to build it in a way in which you still feel like you have freedom. The freedom that you hope that a seven-figure business would produce for you. Today's guest is a millionaire maker. She helps people to do exactly that. She's actually streaming today from her home in the Bahamas, if that gives you any idea of what life could look like while building a seven-figure business. Jess Lenouvel, super excited to have you back on the show. Thanks for joining us today.
I am so here. Thanks so much for having me, Justin.
Now, you created the Listings Lab. So there's a cue, right, for everybody that wants freedom, that Listings is going to be a part of that, in case you didn't realize that. Talk to us a little bit about your story, about how you got from being a top producing agent to now living life in the Bahamas. Please do tell.
Yeah. So, I always tell people, and I know we'll get into this more. The first time I hit seven figures, I did it alone and it was horrible and unhappy. My phone would ring and I would hand my phone to my husband in tears and say, to answer this phone because I one more conversation in me today. It got to so burnt out, and I genuinely my business, which is crazy because from the outside, everybody was thinking so successful. She's doing so well. Look at her production. Inside the actual business, I was miserable. So I had to figure out how to do it. And so my small lean team, and our business grew and grew and grew, and tripling what I was doing on my own in a really finally have the freedom, have the not only the financial, which comes with a business of that size, but also the time freedom. I was able to my business would keep running. I was able to take time off, not answer my phone while I was having dinner, all that sometimes feel impossible when you're running a busy real estate business. So I built my business, my real estate team. And I think it was 2017. I was in Bali and there with a friend, and I was sitting and journaling, and I called my husband. I think it was like the middle of the night for him. And I said, I think I'm done. And I was like, I think that I'm now that we've cracked the code. I felt it was my obligation to show up how to do it, to not let there be so many unhappy people and a lot of it started with I read an article that was about the 5 regrets of the dying, and it hit me really, really hard because it hospice nurses and things like, they talk all the time about lives, and it's always that people worked too much time on the things that they loved with their friends and their family, like things like that really should be the primary focus of our lives, but we get off on money and nothing else. So that's why I teach what I teach. It's a little heavy, but if thousands of agents not have that regret at the end of the day, I had to do it. And our 7-figure agent program, it's where my book came out of. It's the fundamental principle of what we teach and why we teach it.
Jess, I had an experience last night that's going to be a little bit raw. I think I'll be able to hold it together, but I'm I have 6 children for those that know me well. My oldest will be a sophomore in high school. She and I are pretty close, really close actually. And then my next son, for some reason, he and we just butt heads all too often. He's my oldest son, and we have a hard time at times, like really seeing eye to eye. And last night we just had a really heart to heart. He thought I was accusing him of some things, and I wasn't. But it just gave us a chance to like really kind of talk it out. I could tell he wanted to cry. So whenever I sat beside him, I said, "Can I give you a hug?" And then we just sat there and I said, "Corbin, we have 4 years left before you're out of the house. Let's you and I really work on our relationship, because when 4 years come and go, it'll never be quite the same. You will not live here full time."
Yeah.
And it was, he started to really cry at that point. And then I started to cry more. And I had one of those moments that you just described where you get to a certain milestone in life and you look back. And thankfully I'm having it with 4 years to go and not looking back, being like, I only have a certain amount of time to have these kids in my house. And if I don't take advantage of the amazing opportunity to influence them for good, number one, and number two, to enjoy them, like I'm going to have some real regrets here.
Yeah.
And I think all too often, some of the reasons why we do that is because we're stressed. We've got a lot of demands on us. We have big goals that sometimes maybe we have our ladder up against the wrong structure, right? We're climbing the wrong ladder.
Yeah.
And we haven't built our business in such a way to put first, things that matter the most. So I love this topic for all kinds of reasons. For those that know me, know that think bigger doesn't mean just building a bigger real estate empire. It means success and significance, right? Yeah. Income and impact. You can have both. And so I'm thrilled to get into the details of what you do to teach people to do exactly that, to not look back and have built a great business and look back on an empty life saying, dang it, I kind of missed the most important thing. I missed the main thing here.
I missed the point.
Yeah.
Right. I have a friend who said to me today, with words, he said, I was so a great man that I forgot to become and it just made me, he was focused on the business and the things that people would look back at, but he was missing out on this. And that, on it's what we like in the listings lab well is scalable automation and more with less. And if that happen, they're not sexy. Their automation, their standard their retargeting campaigns, they're not things that you're going to think, oh, like I feel so deeply connected to these pieces of technology. But we have the ability to scalable, more automated businesses than we ever have in the past. I grew up in real estate. My mom has been an agent for, 35 plus years. And I think back to when she was building her real estate business, she and automate and scale because the technology just wasn't there. And so I also think that we have this gift that so many agents aren't using that we get to use in order to buy back time, precious time with our kids and our families and our aging parents and, the things that we don't, if we don't plan this out properly.
Yeah. Let's start with it's hard to build freedom if you don't actually have good income, right? Or great income.
True.
So let me ask this question. What is the biggest reason why people don't scale up? What keeps them from 7 figures? Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to make 7 figures, right? Mm-hmm. But when you do the math of taxes, when you do the math of what it actually takes to run a business, you would have to make a case to me that you should have a goal far below that.
I agree.
Right? Because I think in reality, if we were looking at our working years, is that we have to take care of ourselves, not just during these working years, but for the rest of our lives. And there's going to be people around us that we're going to have the ability to help. I think you might need to revisit and say, why am I not striving to build a 7-figure business? That's my take, right? So let's start with that. And then whoever's listening to this, you could adjust it to be your specific goal. But talk to me, Jess, about what is it that keeps people from doing, from ever achieving that kind of success?
There's layers here, right? So I think the first layer sometimes is worthiness. Who am I to have a business like that? Expanding expanding the people who are around you. If you are in circles and, the cliche of the 5 people you spend the most time with, if those people are, not high achieving people, then that won't even be on your radar. Step is, I had a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I was building a bigger business. I was doing about, 400 a year. And I made the decision to cut back and only do 150 a year so I could spend time with my kids. And in my head, the first thing I thought, that's backwards. It's backwards because what you're doing is you're limiting your potential to buy back time. But at 150,000 a year, you're still spending time doing things that you shouldn't do because you don't have the resources to outsource them. So it's the opposite of how things should be. More time spent to get to 4 or 5 than it takes to get to $1 million or to get to $2 million or $3 million. Because once you have those systems built in, it becomes scalable in a way that doesn't require more and more and more time, energy, bandwidth from the person who, quote unquote, owns the business. That idea of freedom means different things to different people. My definition of freedom is being able to do what you want, where, when you want. And you don't get to do any of those things. In a world where, whether it's for, you don't get to do those things if you don't have money and
resources. Yeah.
Resources. Right. And I think that it comes down to who do you like, who are you serving? And also, what do you want to be able to do with those? It's not only about you having more money, about you being able to create change in your community, in the world. It's like all connected to each other. And I think a lot of people don't go after that big, hairy, scary goal, know how. And if every single never did anything that they didn't know how to do, nothing would ever change, right? And I say this to people, the changes. And so you have to be able to go after that thing. Even if you don't, just know, it starts with just knowing that that's the end result that you're going towards.
I love it. So a lot of it's mindset, right? Of having this
totally.
For some reason we're driving with the brake on, right? With the emergency brake, pulling up. I love that.
It's safer. It feels safer.
Let's talk about, again, we only have about 10 minutes left and there's so much more I want to cover. But let's get it out really quickly. If people want to learn more about how you help people, Jess, let's hit that really quickly. What's the best way for them to do that?
I think so there's a couple different ways. One would be read my book. So it's available on Amazon. It's Best Hustle. So very ingrained in what we're talking about today. The second place would be my Facebook group. So I have a Facebook group with about 30,000 agents in Lab Method for real estate agents. It's 100% value. And I give away a ton of free training in there. Trainings, resources, all the things.
Love it. Okay, great. Let's talk now as people are, because there are a lot of ways that can get you to 7 figures. What would you say are a couple of the reasons that keep people from having that, having like the production at that level and freedom? What's the missing link to where people have either could do that or will do that, but what do they need to know now that will give them freedom as well?
It's client generation. There are and manual conversion of business. And when you do that, as you grow, I'm more manual. I call. So a lot of what we teach in the foundational aspects of the listings lab are marketing. I want you to be able to have a tap that you can essentially turn on and off. And I hate talking about they're not people, but a lot of it being able to predictably from stranger to client in an automated, systematized way. And when you can do that and you have the ability to do that at scale, it allows you to essentially build something. So it doesn't matter how the foundation of all of this is digital marketing. Knock your way to multi 7 figures with freedom. It's just got you here won't get you there. So it's really that you're taking on a daily basis, the things that you're doing in order to take yourself, your time, automation, create more scalability and have people coming to you, as opposed to it requiring more scale in order to get those people to talk to you. Which is, I think the old doing this is a whole bunch of people calling them. Well, those the quality of those conversations is going to be relatively bad. And it requires an amount of manpower and hours and patience in order to actually make from those lemons. So a lot of it really that we teach comes down to how can we remove the resistance and to know you, and we call it building relationships. So we use different online methods, different online platforms. It is rooted in the client. And then the business is inbound. And not only does your audience grow, your influence grows, and you attract people on a larger scale quickly grows.
So the question we should be asking ourselves is the activities that I'm doing, are they scalable, right? They might get you to a certain point, but if you want to get to that point beyond that, is there some way for me to scale that? And if the answer is no, then you may very well have your answer of like, okay, this will get me to a point, and am I happy with that point?
Yeah.
And if I'm not, then at least at that point, I need to say, okay, how do I need to pivot from here? Because again, I believe strongly in a referral-based, relationship-based business. However, I also believe that you can make relationships with certain people, certain professionals, certain industry influencers that have the ability to send a lot of business your way, right? Mm-hmm. And even that may take you to a certain point where you're like, okay, I can get to 7 figures at that, but if I want to go beyond that, at some point I need to make a pivot. At some point I need to add in something else that layers on top of the bread and butter of my business that allows me to then go to another level, right?
Mm-hmm. And all of this compounds, media attention compounds, like the pound, like there's a compounding effect and a spiral upwards from each and every piece of what we're talking. And that's where a lot of the ease comes in. Create that compounding effect, and it takes a lot less energy and a lot of those spirals moving upwards as opposed to restart it every day.
Give us an example of that, Jess. Give us an example of a strategy or a method that would fit with your description right there.
So let's say I'm going to probably one of the most underutilized in the real estate, like a local newspaper that everybody reads, or a local online forum or whatever that everybody, and that person, journalists are just content creators. And I think that's also something that people forget. They think that they sit back and they wait to like come to them and say, hey, for this such and such a thing, instead of just doing really basic, speech. But also after time, when you create more notoriety, certain things, your audience becomes like a larger sphere of influence, and you will have more and more people reaching out to you. Then let's say that you get an article written about you in such and such then not only then able to use that interview or use that article in front of your own audience to create more credibility, more authority, all of those things. You're also now in entirely new audience you were not in front of before. So that effect, that like almost immediately your audience grows. It wasn't done about exponential growth of a real estate business. We're talking about leveraging a lot of different people, right? My friend Justin, who has been in the list, they did Authority Magazine did a whole article on him, all about like article than it was a business article. His audience grew. He got business from the Authority Magazine audience, but then also he was able to current audience, and people learned about him. People thought he was more credible because there was this PR about him, and all of it just sounding in an upwards.
I love it. Sounds like there's tons of things that we haven't gotten to, right? That you help agents to really do. I encourage you to, again, visit Jess inside of our Facebook group, Listings Lab Method for Real Estate Agents. Good stuff, everybody. Hopefully everybody that's joined in here today has learned something about how to think bigger, right? How to take not just your business to a certain level, but be sure that that's also in alignment with the life that you want. I think that's a big takeaway for all of us, is to be able to say, is this actually going to create the life that I want? How to create a business that doesn't just give me income, but also gives me impact? One final question, Jess, and then we'll wrap up. What do you do to continue to be a big thinker? What do you do to continue to expand your possibilities?
I consistently make sure that I'm bigger things than I am.
I love it. I love it. Super simple answer, and it's a powerful one. Right? Be in rooms where people are doing bigger stuff than you're doing. Jess, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your wisdom, getting us thinking about really the possibilities of having big success, but big success that's in alignment with significance. Again, that's what we're about here at the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. So appreciate you keeping our minds on that big goal, and enjoy the Bahamas. We're not jealous at all, I promise.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for tuning in today. And my final request is this: go think bigger. Thanks again, Jess. If you enjoyed this episode, then I have a very special invitation for you. I've created a private Facebook community called Successful Real Estate Agents, where the focus is going beyond success, having both a successful business and a significant life. If you're not yet a member,